The new season of The Dragon Prince just dropped on Netflix, and I don't know about you, but I feel like this is the best season yet. Aaron E. Haas and Justin Richmond are great writers through and through, but like with Avatar: The Last Airbender, as they begin to approach their endgame, every single dramatic moment begins to just hit way too hard. And what they did to Erebos this season should be legitimately illegal to show on television. But if you haven't seen it, go watch the show now, because we're about to go into huge spoiler territory, while also explaining the crazy real-life lore surrounding Erebos. My name is Deep Cut, you can call me Timeblind Deep Cut. Welcome back to Cartoon Universe, and let's break down Season 6 of The Dragon Prince. Season 5, of course, ended with the Dragon Prince kids finally catching up with Claudia and trying to find the prison of Erebos. Erebos, we'd learn, was being kept in a tiny prison pearl at the bottom of the Sea of the Castout, over which there is a great statue of Erebos crying and another star-touched elf who we know as the Merciful One. Book 6 opened not with the Dragon Prince kids, but with a flashback to Erebos deep in the past, standing over what we now know to be the Sea of the Castout, where he would later be imprisoned. Here we can see the Merciful One approaching Erebos, seemingly to offer Erebos some sort of mercy. They cryptically state that all beings are stardust, held together by love, only for an instant. This is a scene that would come back in the finale with the full story explaining why Erebos is crying so hard that the entire Sea of the Castout was created by his tears. Now, as we know from the end of the series, Erebos is mourning the death of his daughter, someone that the Merciful One, as well as the other star-touched elves on her council, were responsible for executing. It's fitting then that following this cryptic scene of Erebos crying without the later explanation, we cut not to the Dragon Prince kids still, but to the story of Claudia and Viren. At the end of Season 5, Claudia and Viren were seeking Erebos' prison because Erebos was going to teach a way to keep Viren alive after finding him, with Viren being set to die just 30 days after Claudia revived him if they did not perform an extra ritual. Erebos, before even being rescued from his prison, is happy to explain his plan to save Viren, which involves the sacrificing of one of his own children. Viren refuses to do this, and not because it would mean sacrificing Claudia or her brother Soren, as Erebos had provided a scapegoat sacrifice. Erebos had given Viren a monster hybrid of the two of them that would serve as a child's blood to be spilled to keep Viren alive. Viren rejected this because he saw the corruption that was coming to him and his family, but when the story cuts to him, he is not just alive, but feeling more free than ever. He had already started to go down a path of doubting his darkness in the previous 30 days of life that he was given, but with this final part of the sacrifice complete, he feels like a new man. He doesn't want to just be good, he wants to face his truth, as he said, and be held accountable for his actions. Instead, this sacrifice was performed not just by Claudia, but on Claudia, who had given up one of her legs in order to keep her father alive. I cannot tell you how hard it was to watch the scenes of Claudia crying on the shore, begging her father not to leave her, screaming about all she had done to bring him back to life. But in the end, he does end up abandoning her. What's wild about this is that it's an eerie portrayal of what happens to some parents when they have a real-life near-death experience. After dying for a few minutes and managing to come back to life, many people begin to experience a sense of moral responsibility that they didn't have before. For someone like Viren, who had done damage to other people, this comes with an extreme desire to repent. But for those who have not done much in the way of bad, there is still the huge desire to go off and help others who need it, even at the expense of your own family. There are reports of parents dying and coming back to life with so much empathy that they abandon their children to go help with projects around the world to serve underprivileged people. Here, Viren does just that, abandoning his own daughter to go and atone for what he has done to the world, and in doing so, also tries to prove to Claudia that nothing, not even family, is worth darkening your soul over. Now, when Viren makes it back to Catullus and turns himself into Ezran in the authorities, he thinks he is turning away from Erebos by being locked away in his cell, repenting for what he did to help him. But as the shot pulls out, we can see a spider coming to eat a fly caught in a web. This foreshadowed what the finale would prove, which was that even Viren's desire for redemption was all part of Erebos' plan, or the mystery of Erebos. Now, to most of us, a mystery is just something to solve, but when it comes to mysticism and religious tradition, a mystery can mean something else. All around the ancient world, from Egypt to India to Greece and through Europe, there is a tradition known as the mystery schools. These were private societies that were heavily focused on the process of initiation. This involved reenacting a ceremonial play known as a mystery play, wherein the initiate tries to solve a mystery but is also given the tools to better solve the mystery of their own local mythology. Now, in each of these mystery school systems, the story focused on the death and resurrection of a mythological character. In Egypt, this was Osiris, who died but was spiritually resurrected thanks to his wife Isis giving birth to their son Horus, who was able to defeat Set, allowing Osiris to become the god of the afterlife. In Greece, there were several mystery school systems, such as the Eleusinian Mysteries. In this system, the initiate played the role of Persephone, who was taken into the underworld by Hades, with her father Zeus eventually helping her return. In the Nordic countries, they had the Mysteries of Balder, who was killed in the final battle of Ragnarok in the end times, but is resurrected to rule the new world. Some of these systems would even push the body of the initiate to the brink of death by making them run 25 miles before witnessing these plays, giving them a near-death experience rush of hormones that made them feel as if they had died and been restored. This was written about by some of the initiates of this ancient system, who described it as a life-changing experience. Those who participated were forbidden to write down what they actually witnessed, and these were what we might think of as secret or private societies, but they would write amply about what the experience had taught them. These secret societies, including those Eleusinian Mysteries in particular, were known for initiations that included putting the initiate in a blindfold and having a guide lead them through several ceremonial acts where the guide provides a password and code words for the initiate. It's fitting then that immediately after this death and rebirth scene with Viren, we cut then to his son Soren leading Opeli to a secret meeting, where she is wearing a blindfold and Soren does a secret knock before announcing their entry with secret codenames. This perfectly set up the rest of the season, which continues to dive into this blindfold initiation theme, with an interesting focus on seeing the future as explored with the Celestial Elves. The first episode focused primarily on the Dragon Prince crew trying to figure out what they should do with Erebos' prison, which eventually led them to those Celestial Elves up north. Callum in particular was on edge because as a user of dark magic, he's let himself open to a direct physical control from Erebos, who guides Callum in his sleep to try and get him to open his prison. Callum, however, had learned of an ancient group of Skywing Elves that call themselves Celestial Elves that his history book claims has the one item that can kill a star-touched elf like Erebos. A lot of the season becomes about Callum and Rayla traveling to the icy north to find these elves and learn if they can end the threat of Erebos. Now, each season focuses on a new type of elf, but after 5 seasons, the only remaining elf to be explored are the Star-Touched Elves. We get a lot of lore about them in this season because this is the book called Stars, but not as much as you'd expect based on the other elves from the previous seasons. The Celestial Elves are just a group of Skywing Elves, something we had explored all the way back in Volume 2, but these Celestial Elves had an interesting history. Celestial Elves are an ancient faction of elves according to Callum, so they don't actually share much in common with the previous culture of Sky Elves explored in the show, which were portrayed as very loose and nomadic. Celestial Elves, however, don't travel around the world and live entirely around a star scraper, a magically enhanced place that helps the Celestial Elves see even above the sky and into the stars. These Celestial Elves are explained to wear blindfolds at all times, save for the night of the new moon each month, where the only light that can be seen is the starlight. They are, of course, very adapted to this lifestyle, as most of the Skywing Elves had not even taken their blindfolds off for that one moonless night a month, as there is a storm that occurs on every new moon that ends up covering the stars for them. This has gone on for about 300 years, with only the eldest Celestial Elf leader ever having taken his blindfold off. When removing their blindfolds to see the stars, the elves are able to see beyond reality and into the future. Some elves are so great at this that they become time-blind. This allows them to see well into the future and even into the souls of elves and humans. These blindfolds mirror the one worn by Opeli when being guided to the door for our little secret society initiation metaphor, but the elves introduce a new aspect of the mystery school tradition, which is the gift of prophecy. Like with the elves in the show, the real-life mystery schools eventually became focused on trying to learn about the future with the gift of prophecy, particularly as guided by the stars. These stars were spirits that were guiding humans as gods in each religion according to the tradition such as Gnosticism, with some stars being considered noble and giving humans knowledge that guide them to a better future for all, and others being more what we would call Luciferian, a fallen star that misleads people for personal revenge. The mystery of Erebos, thus, is the mystery of whether or not Erebos is a noble entity who will ultimately help Xadia, or a malevolent one who only wants to bring disaster to those he feels have wronged him, from elves to dragons or any other species. He is a being of the stars, with the star-touched elves having such long lifespans that they are said to understand the workings of time to a degree that even the dragons aren't shown to have. They are essentially prophetic. Erebos uses this to his advantage, manipulating the small lives of mortal beings across the centuries to bring about his revenge. The celestial elves have used the gift of prophecy to guide their people towards a better future, and they even foresaw the coming of the giant clouds that would cover the stars on every moonless night for centuries. With that, however, they also saw that a chosen two would appear, a mage and a warrior, a human and an elf. This, of course, is Callum and Rayla, but there's an interesting level of doubt that Rayla has about this. She doesn't see the prophecy as legitimate, despite existing in a world with magic where star-touched elves can seemingly see what's coming next already. This was less of a logical choice for any of the characters, and more so want to just help explore the nuance of prophecy. Callum, however, believes it's true, and that all he and Rayla have to do is pierce the heart of the beast and melt it. However, when they discover that the beast is just grieving the loss of Luna Tenebris, a former dragon queen, they ended up piercing and melting its heart metaphorically. In the end, Callum and Rayla weren't just destined to do this by the stars, but were the only ones who could pull this off, but not for the reason that Callum expected based on the prophecy. The nature of prophecy here is shown to be accurate, but hard to read, which is a common enough trope in entertainment that you've probably seen it before. And it makes sense if you consider the idea of prophecy existing in our real world. We have supposedly prophetic texts, and if they are true in some way, they are definitely very hard to interpret, using heavy symbolism. After taming the beast and melting its heart, Callum and Rayla return to the Star Scraper, where one of the new celestial elf friends, Cosmo, becomes Timeline. This allows him to see various futures, and as we will later see, he can explore one future or another before deciding to go back and decide what he really wants to do. And this is an ability he seems to continue to have even after the moonless night has ended and he's placed his blindfold back on. When he first gets this power on the moonless night, Cosmo looks into the soul of the people around him. His sister, Rayla, who he says shines bright, and Callum, who he says only has darkness. This is of course because of the dark magic that Callum has used, but this provides a sort of concrete proof that Cosmo confirms, that it's dark magic that allows Erebos to physically control Callum. All is not lost, however, because Callum can undergo something of an initiation ritual himself, where he has to put on the blindfold and attempt to find light. This Star Truth ritual will fill Callum with light, but if he uses dark magic again, it will overcome him entirely, something to look out for in Season 7. This ritual involved Callum putting on the blindfold and being guided by Cosmo to a degree, as well as some venom from a Star Weaver spider in order to give that near-death experience feel. Callum's journey begins with a rise, but suddenly he is surrounded by darkness and fears that there is nothing but darkness in him already, and thus he begins to fall. In the Gnostic mystery tradition, the dying and reborn figure is known as Sophia, Greek for wisdom. Instead of being a goddess who fell into the underworld like in the Eleusinian mysteries, Sophia was a divine emanation or angel who fell into the material world and became trapped in the bodies of humans. Callum's rise and sudden fall mirrors the beginning of Sophia's story, where she tries to rise to be like the highest god of light above, only to be pulled into the material world below, where her own light is covered by darkness. However, just like the earlier mystery traditions, it is because of this fall that Sophia is able to rise again, after she is filled with divine light from her cosmic twin, which in Callum's case would be Rayla. It is no coincidence, I think, that in between these scenes, cut right between Callum's fall and his rise, we cut away to Viren admitting to the story of his own son Soren. Soren nearly died, but Viren used dark magic to save him deep in the past, this being Viren's own initiation into the darkest of arts, to essentially bringing back the dead. Unfortunately, even with this special ritual, the Celestial Elves claim that they didn't have any way to help Callum and Rayla with their real problem, which was killing Erebos. While the Nova Blade was known to kill star-touched elves in the past, it only ends their physical existence, and unfortunately, was also lost some time ago. Star elves don't need their physical bodies, and if they are killed, then they can just appear again when the stars align. The Nova Blade is the only thing that is known to end that physical existence other than simply old age, with the star-touched elves being able to live thousands of years elsewise. So even if they had this Nova Blade to give to Callum, it would just lead to Erebos returning the next time the stars align. So the Prison Pearl continues to be the safest option in theory. That immediately goes wrong when Erebos manages to bring together all the elements necessary to escape his prison with the help of Claudia. Now at this point, Viren had made it to Catullus where he was being kept prisoner, but then he gave his life with the hope of rescuing everyone else from the flames of Sol Regem. As discussed before, this all seemed to be part of Erebos' plan, which for the last few seasons had become clear was less about Viren and more about Claudia. Viren was just a pawn in Erebos' game, and he has gone from focusing on Viren in the opening credits to Claudia, who we could say is his real queen here. It's through her that he believes he can escape his prison and restore himself, but it's the fact that Claudia had lost Viren in this way that she's suddenly so willing to help Erebos even when Terry is begging her not to. Viren ended up dying doing a good, something Claudia had ultimately wanted of him from the get-go. Even with their fascination with dark magic, it's not like they learned this stuff to be evil, they learned it to try and help people, specifically the people of Catullus. Claudia had become obsessed with bringing her father back and making him live a healthy life, but dying in this way, as tragic as it was, made Claudia feel even more deeply for her father, and thus was much more easily able to be manipulated by Erebos. It's here that Erebos begins to reveal his truth, which is that he himself had a daughter that he loved dearly, bringing us back to the beginning of the season where we saw that flashback of Erebos crying right before it cut to the story of Viren and Claudia. As Erebos tells the tragic story of losing his daughter, we realize that because of just how much pain he felt losing her, he knew that he could manipulate humans who were feeling those same emotions. With Claudia, we got the reverse of Erebos' story, with her losing her father, but being so loving towards him that she now wants to help Erebos. Someone who has felt the pain that she is feeling, not realizing that Erebos is the one who caused all of it. Now, in addition to prophecy, it's interesting that this season based on initiation ends with the summoning of Erebos with this ritual. Erebos is well known to be a Luciferian type character, one who gives human knowledge, but knowledge that ultimately seems to corrupt. One thing Eren Eha said in one of our interviews with him was that the big question of the series was whether or not this Erebos figure is evil or ultimately somehow helpful, that being the mystery of Erebos as we discussed before. In the mystery school tradition, the summoning of this entity was treated by some as godly, others as demonic or, as we said, Luciferian. Like Erebos, this entity that the mystery schools were trying to be in contact with, whether good or evil, was something that was not just trying to get humans to summon it according to their respective writings we have, but that was manipulating humans into summoning it one way or another, jumping between different cultures and knowing that there was a greater plan if each culture along the way failed. In the show, this results in Erebos not just escaping that small pearl, but also becoming this massive titan, so large that Claudia can fit in his hand. This is different from the form we saw him take in flashbacks, where he appeared as tall as the other species of elves native to Zadia. This has perfectly set up Erebos to actually act out his final plan in Season 7, but what exactly is that plan? Now, when it comes to the question of whether or not Erebos is good or bad, so far it seems entirely bad. We know that he is motivated by revenge for his daughter, and so far he doesn't seem to care who ends up dying in the crossfire. In the final episode before being revived, Erebos told the story to Claudia of his daughter Leola. This is her Star-Touch name, but he simply referred to her as Unicorn because of her rare trait of having one horn in the center of her head instead of two like all of the other elves. But this name Unicorn also has a very important significance in the world of the Dragon Prince. According to Erebos, Leola lived only a few short but very happy years with Erebos before she was accused of giving magic to humans. Humans are a species without magic and saw themselves as suffering in ways that the magical elves and other creatures of Zadia did not have to because of their magic power. Other species saw giving magic to humans as dangerous, and as we would learn in the finale, Star-Touched elves absolutely forbid it. It is a corruption of existence that sends it spiraling into chaos, and the only way to make up for it, according to the Council, was the life of the elf responsible for teaching that magic to the humans. According to the council, humans had learned the gifts of magic from Erebos' daughter. The witness to this was who the star-touched elves referred to at the time as the Dragon Prince, Anak Arau. This is a name that Erebos used earlier in the season to refer to Sol Regem before he died. Anak in Hebrew being the name for the long-necked father of the last known line of Nephilim in the Bible, who had taken over the land of Canaan before the Egyptian Exodus. Sol Regem then is the one who claims that Leola gave humans dark magic, the one responsible for the death of Leola. There was nothing Erebos could do to stop this, and as we tragically witnessed, Leola was killed by the council. This seems to be permanent, which implies that while the Celestial Elves were right that the Nova Blade was only a temporary solution to stopping Erebos, the Star-Touched Elves themselves could have killed him if they chose to. But as of now, we don't know why Erebos is spared by the council after everything he's done to affect the world with dark magic, especially considering that his daughter Leola only seemed to teach humans the very basics. Now, actual unicorns are rarely mentioned in the show, but in Season 3, Episode 6, we do see Viren with a unicorn horn from a dark magic spell that he prepares for Ezran's father. Here he explains that the unicorns are extremely rare, but they aren't impossible to find, as Claudia did end up finding one even after years of failure for Viren. Following Season 3, however, we would begin to get novelizations of Seasons 1 and 2, and these weren't just some scholastic book fair ghostwriters just cheesily adapting the story, but it was actually written by Aaron E. Haas and his wife, Melanie E. Haas. The added details in the story were very intentional, especially around the use of unicorns, with the character of Erebos' daughter Unicorn also becoming more developed as the team worked towards Season 4 after concluding the original arc in Volume 3, where Leola's constellation would suddenly be seen in the Season 4 opening. Now, the novelization of the Dragon Prince opens similarly to the show, with an explanation of the history of the conflict with the humans and elves. However, this writing is signed as being left behind by Erebos. Here, Leola is not mentioned by name, but instead Erebos claims that the unicorns are the most compassionate creatures in all of Xadia, who ended up teaching humans magic so that they could better take care of themselves. This was very hard to achieve with the runes and Draconian language that the humans were taught, and eventually dark magic became an exploitation that humans would latch onto, with easier access to the dead creature's magic that they're sacrificing. This led to the humans turning on the unicorns and hunting them down to the point where they disappeared completely from Xadia, according to the text. This contradicts what we had just seen in Season 3 with Claudia getting the horn of a unicorn, which the art book for the show of the Dragon Prince depicts as actually happening, though apparently one Dragon Prince crew member would later claim that Claudia found the unicorn, but we don't actually know that she killed or hurt it to get the horn. Just because this writing contradicts what we see in the show doesn't mean it isn't canon, however, as this is the writing of Erebos in particular. While he could likely make an excellent historian with his long lifespan, his plan is to manipulate the humans and the other creatures of Xadia, and to do so, he is able to give half-truths, information that misleads people even if it has some basis in reality. In the text, he claims that the unicorns disappeared from Xadia, but not that they actually went extinct, with the idea that they did become extinct being more a perception of the humans and elves based on not seeing them around anymore, the few sightings like Claudia being seen as folktales in the current age of the show. In the later game book, Tales of Xadia, we get an elaboration on this, though it's not signed by Erebos and the level of canon is questionable, even though the Dragon Prince team did weigh in on these writings. Here, it is explained that one unicorn, Leola, was said to take pity on the humans and teach them magic. This was just 8 months before the release of Season 4, where we would see that Leola is not a unicorn, but a star-touched elf with one horn in the opening credits where we see her constellation. Since then, the history of the unicorns has been hotly debated by the fandom. While it is possible that there were some changes in the development of the story over time, and that originally there was going to be more importance for actual unicorns, with Leola being the decision they made later on, it would seem to me that with what we now know about Erebos' story, he simply used his daughter's nickname, Unicorn, in order to hide her real story in a historical legend for humans about how they hunted down unicorns to near extinction. Leola is also described as having a fallen form, however, and Haley likes to think that it's possible that her fallen form looks more like a unicorn, but more on that in a future video. It's apparently something of a common theme for unicorns and elves to become a smaller and smaller population that goes into hiding to avoid humans, and in fact, one Dragon Prince fan even found this clip from an older cartoon involving unicorns.
That cannot be. Why would I be the last? What do men know? Because they have seen no unicorns for a while does not mean that we have all vanished. We do not vanish. There has never been a time without unicorns. We live forever. We are as old as the sky, old as the moon. We can be hunted, trapped. We can even be killed if we leave our forests, but we do not vanish.
It would seem to me that when Leola was alive, she taught magic to a human, probably just another child like her. As Erebos said, it was likely a petty trick, but it's something that would corrupt humans with enough training. As adults began to understand the kind of magic the child would bring home, the people of Aelarion would begin to reverse engineer that to access magic more easily, before eventually turning to dark magic because this was apparently too difficult according to the Tales of Xadia text. Erebos was able to hide the story of his daughter in plain sight, in such a way that has manipulated humans for hundreds of years now. After the death of his daughter, Erebos cried for so long that he filled the crater her death created with tears, creating the Sea of the Castout. Erebos here is the Castout, with a statue existing of the Merciful One trying to offer Erebos a mercy, it would seem, though their name doesn't stem from this particular interaction, it seems. In the Dragon Prince novelization, it is the daughter of the Elven leader who is said to allow for the humans to end up going to the west and starting their own kingdoms, instead of being wiped out by the dragons and elves entirely. Now, this figure is just listed as the daughter of an Elven leader. It doesn't specify that she was a Star-Touched elf or that it was a Star-Touched elf leader, but the Star-Touched elves do essentially rule Xadia, even when from the distance. Here, the daughter is also referred to as the one who made the Merciful Compromise, which I believe means this is an early version of the Merciful One before they became non-binary in the show's official development. They were clearly not merciful, however, when it came to Erebos and his daughter, only making things worse by giving Erebos the option to die with Leola. It was so heartbreaking to watch Leola have to go through that alone because Erebos couldn't bring himself to end his own existence, wanting instead to dedicate his life to a new plan for Leola's revenge. With that in mind, Erebos appears to be the evil Luciferian figure, one who seems to corrupt what remains of existence to get revenge on people like Sol Regem, who he deems responsible for the death of his daughter. This doesn't just mean corrupting the human existence to spite the Star-Touched elves further either, but he likely has some elaborate plan to make them suffer in the way he suffered, and perhaps even find a way to bring his daughter back. The show's largely about the power of dark magic to revive beings, about death and rebirth, both literal and symbolic, for so many characters, as well as the sacrifice of self and family and children for a greater good. With that in mind, Erebos seems like a figure who is only out to hurt people who hurt him, a figure of pure vengeance, with the only hope being that somehow Callum and the others can find a way to get the Star-Touched elves to end Erebos the way they ended his own daughter's life. But is that what Leola would want? Leola was just a child, and I can't imagine any parent basing every single decision off of what their deceased child would have wanted. Elsewise, Erebos wouldn't have gone as far as he did to make Sol Regem suffer on top of killing him in the end. Erebos clearly has evil parts of his plans, but it's possible that the endgame is something that Leola ultimately would be very happy about. The unicorns were described by Erebos as being the most compassionate of creatures in Xadia, with the unicorns here just being a metaphor for his own daughter, it would seem. Whether she taught humans small magics or great spells that were meant to help them, it was clear that Leola was someone who already found humans fascinating based on how she would play with them as a child. Even with seemingly being warned that humans shouldn't be helped in Erebos' written version of the story, she couldn't resist, because she saw something good in humans. And in the end, maybe that is what Erebos is after as well. While his enemies may suffer and their kingdoms fall along the way, perhaps what Erebos had planned will involve the final outcome of humans not just having magic, but using it responsibly. In the past, Leola seemed to make it so that humans could use the proper magic, not all that different from elves, but it was very difficult. The humans perhaps seem to be evolving more and more into the ability to connect with the primal sources of magic, with Callum being the greatest example of this in the show. But with dark magic having become a dominating force at the time of Aelarion, people like Callum would never get the chance to truly explore this power. Erebos' grand plan seemed to be to start with the gifting of a magic staff to the mage Zard of Aelarion, something we saw in the famous first scene all the way back in Season 1, which we would later come back to with even more context. Here, Sol Regem had become so fed up with how dark magic has grown that he threatened Zard to give up dark magic or else lose his entire city. Zard, of course, refused, and Sol Regem destroyed Alarion, leaving Sol Regem blinded. After this and the disappearance of the unicorns, the elves united against the humans, wanting to even wipe them out of existence, but that merciful one in the novelization was said to suggest that the humans simply move out west. From here, humans continued to experiment with dark magic, but it became more of a rarity over time, leading into the modern era where very few people such as Viren seem to actually use it, with the King of Katolis not always being sure whether or not they should be using it through him. It was Erebos' decision to further corrupt humans that has led to where they are today, which is potentially very scary with what Viren and Claudia had been through. But is it possible that humans will learn from their mistakes? The Star-Touched Elves should be able to see beyond even what the time-blind Celestial Skywing Elves can. They are said to have the ability to understand the future in a way that other beings simply do not. Is it possible that what Erebos is doing is all to purposely bring about the Age of Magic in humans as rediscovered by Callum, giving humanity a second chance to use magic for the right reasons, and along the way, perhaps even revive his daughter? Season 6 is not the end of the Dragon Prince's story, and with Erebos out in this Titan form, that still leaves the entirety of Season 7 to see just how deep Erebos' plan runs, as I doubt he just got locked up in order to escape and commit random acts of violence. Whatever happens in Season 7 will likely be pretty twisted at first, but perhaps by the end of it, we will see a grander plan that only someone who thinks as far ahead as Erebos could have imagined. But what are your theories? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe because we're going to have even more deep dives on this season, Leola, and the Celestial Elves. And if you really want to talk about the Dragon Prince, come on over to the Cartoon Universe Discord server, link in the pinned comment down below. Here, you'll have access to the Dragon Prince channel, as well as a lot of other channels to talk about all of your favorite cartoons. See you guys then.